question is on the political side of responding to the crisis, and your part of that talk focused on polarization. So I'm wondering about variation across countries. Like, do we observe that some countries had more capacity to respond decisively, whereas others were shackled? And is there sort of a growing research attention?
That's a very good question. I think it raises an important question for scholars and for researchers, which is broader than just the current crisis. And that is, what are the factors of domestic, social, and political systems that make for more effective response to a crisis? Could also mean, you could also ask, that make for more effective policies that avoid a crisis in the first place, right? And I think that, I don't have a specific answer, but I'll give you a quick answer and then tell you about some ideas. The quick answer is that we could ask whether it's the social order, that is the structure of interest in society, or who are the winners, who are the losers, and what's their relationship with one another, or you could ask about political institutions, parliamentarism, presidentialism, coalition governments, things like that. Generally speaking, whether it's on the social side or on the political side, anything that allows for more credible commitments to engage in joint sacrifice, that is to say, yes, this will cost the business sector something, but we also expect labor to make some sacrifices, or vice versa. Yes, labor is going to be asked to make some sacrifices, but we are also going to take something out of the hide of business. Anything that can do that in a credible way is much more likely to succeed. And I'll give some examples from the Latin American experience. It's not, I think, coincidental that many of the governments that have been most successful at imposing pretty severe austerity measures that lasted, that took, that weren't reversed after 6 months, and that were generally led to a substantial restructuring of the economy, that most of those governments were either center left or left, right? Like in Brazil. I have Brazil on mind because I was just there for a few days. And I think the main reason for that is it's very hard for a conservative government to go to the labor union and say, we're going to ask you to take a 25% cut in real wages, and we're also going to take that out of the hide of businesses, and so it's going to be a shared sacrifice. It's much more credible for a left-wing government to do that, to say, you're going to have to sacrifice for the good of the country, and we're going to make sure that the business sector does the same. So that's whatever you could associate with the willingness or ability of the government to credibly commit itself to sharing the burden is going to lead to a more effective. That's, I think, why, by the way, why you have a number of fairly positive experience, positive in relative terms, in the European context. A country like Estonia or a country like Ireland. In both cases, for a variety of reasons, the governments in power were able to structure adjustment policies that were generally, with some, in the case of Ireland, the way they did it was by putting to a referendum what the European Union was demanding in terms of adjustment, and the referendum was voted massively. So essentially the government said, you want us to impose these severe austerity measures that are really unfair? Okay, we'll put it to a vote. It loses, and so the government can then turn around and say, we're going to do it our way, and we're going to distribute the costs of austerity more evenly, and the same thing in Estonia. Now, both of those countries went through, and still are in, very difficult economic problems, but they, unlike Greece, or more recently perhaps Portugal, or Hungary, another negative example, they were able to come to consensual agreements on, generally consensual agreements on the way forward. I don't want to take up too much time, but I'll just say I have one of the, talking with William and just for coming here, I have a project that I'm just embarking on, looking at all of the instances in which countries have realized very substantial bonanzas, these big booms, most of which end in crisis, but about quarter to a third of which don't. Try to figure out what is it about the political and social order in these countries that leads some to respond to this capital flow cycle in time to avoid falling off a cliff, and others not. So the quick way of answering the question is, if I knew the answer, I'd certainly publish it. But I have some ideas, right?